A gute Woche. The Rabbi soll gesund sein started the Farbrengen by mentioning that since we're in we're in the middle of the 3 weeks, and we're in the time of Ikvasa the Mashiach, the end of the 6,000 years, the end of the 2,000 years connected to Mesa Mashiach. So it's especially appropriate to find simonim which are connected to the Geula. And first of all, we find that the 3 weeks this year started, the Shivas B'Tamuz was on Tuesday. Tuesday is the Yom Shehuchbal Bei Kitev, that it says twice Kitev. And the idea of Kfeila, of doubling something, is connected to the Geula HaSida, the Geula that will come through Mashiach. As it says in Medrash, when you get in regards to the word Lech Lecha, that it says a doubly, the word Lech, is connected to the Geula, and in the same way, the letters Man Tzapach, in other words, Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Pei, and Chof, these are letters that there's two ways of writing the letters. One way of writing the letter while it's in the middle of the word, and another way of writing the letter while it's at the end of the word. So it's explained that these letters are especially connected to the Geula. In the same way, Yom HaShlishi, Shehuchbal Bei Kitev, is also connected to the Geula. And we find also the name of Mashiach is called Tzemach and it's called Tzadik. So it's both of these words start with the letter Tzadik, which is also a double Tzadik, is connected to the Geula HaSida. The same way Shabbos, the Farbrengen took place on Shabbos. So Shabbos, the Medrash tells us that everything of Shabbos is double. That you have Lechem Mishnah on Shabbos, and the same thing, everything connected with Shabbos, the Mon that was given on Friday, also for Shabbos, was a Mon Kofel. So the idea of Kfeila, of double, is also connected to Mashiach, to the concept of Geula. Shabbos in itself is obviously connected to Geula, because Shabbos immediately is connected to the time when it will be Yom Shekuli Shabbos, a day which will be completely Shabbos, the day of when it will be La'asad Lavi. So then it will entirely be a time of Shabbos, a time of Geula. And on Shabbos itself, we also have both the idea of Teira and Tefillah, which is this Sulam. Sulam is a ladder. In a ladder, there are two ways of going on a ladder. There's a way of going on a ladder, Milmaila Lamata, from up down. You're going down on the ladder. And the same way, there's a way of going up on the ladder, Milmata Lamaila. So that is the difference between Teira and Tefillah. Teira is the Aveda, as it's explained in Chassidus, Milmaila Lamata. And Tefillah is the Aveda Milmata Lamaila. The Rebbe also connected it with the fact that we start the Pirkei Avos, this time for the third time. We start again saying Pirkei Avos, Meisha Kibel Teira Misinai, that everything originates from Sinai. And Sinai is Bigematria Sulam. That says if Sulam doesn't have a Vav, so it has the same numerical value as the word Sinai. So in Sulam, there are two types of Sulamis. There's a Sulam Milmaila Lamata and a Sulam Milmata Lamaila, which is Teira and Tefillah. So the Teira of Shabbos, we have twice Kriyas HaTeira on Shabbos. And the same way Tefillah, we have Shachris and we have Musaf, which is again the idea of double. This is also connected to the Parshas HaShavua, which we read this week, the Parsha of Pinchas, which immediately is connected to the idea of Geula. As the Rebbe mentioned last Shabbos, that it says Pinchas Ze Eliyahu, that Pinchas is connected with Eliyahu HaNavi, is the same person as Eliyahu HaNavi Zachar Latev, which is the one that will tell us about the Geula HaShlema. And the connection between Pinchas and Eliyahu, Pinchas and the Geula, is obvious from the fact that Pinchas was the one that was Bekanias Kinasi, that he fought with the Midyanim. And as it's explained in Chassidus, that the idea of Midyan is Miloshin Modern meaning a fight, which means that when the idea of Sinna and Machlekes is Be'aveda Ruchnis, and the Ruchnis, the Kaveda, that's the idea of Klipa of Midyan, which is the Shadish, is the Mokir of all other Klipas. In other words, there are the 7 Amim, the 7 nations that lived in Eretz Yisrael, which symbolize the 7 types of Midas Rois. And then there's also Midyan, which is connected to the idea of Machlekes, which is Pirut, causes the separation between one Jew and another. And that is the Mokir. From this Midah Ro, that's where all the other Midas Rois come from. Pinchas did was that he fought with Midian. In other words, he fought with the idea of Pirud and Machlekes, which is Bekanias Kinosi, and therefore the Eibishter gave him as a Matone, Hineni Nesenle, as Brisi Shalom, the idea of Shalom, which brings immediately the Geula Hasidah. In this week's parasha, we also have the psukim which are connected to La'ela Ticholik Haaretz, which is talking about the Chalukah of Eretz Yisrael, which was done Al Yedei Yeshua. So again, the idea of La'ela Ticholik Haaretz immediately reminds us that eventually, and very, very soon, there will be the Chalukah Haaretz again, and every Yid will have a Chelik in Eretz Yisrael, and the difference that will happen, the difference that will be by Geula Hasidah as opposed to what happened by Chalukah Haaretz al Yedei Yeshua was that when Yeshua was Mechalik Haaretz, Shevet Levi had no Chelik. Masha'inkin lo asid lovei, there will be a Chelik also to Shevet Levi, as it says that there will be Yud Gimel Sharim, 13 Sharim, as LeLevi will be Chelik Echad, which Echad is Bigematri, has the numerical value of 13, which means that the Echad of the 13th will be connected to Levi. The idea of Chalukah Haaretz was done through three ways. First of all, there was the Gadol, and secondly, there was the Lats that they threw in order to divide Eretz Yisrael, and then there was also L'Rav Tarba Nachlosi, V'Lam'at Tamitis Nachlosi, the idea that it was done Al Piseichel, and there was also the Urim V'Tumim, which is the three Dargas Naveda Sa'adim that a person has to, as the famous saying of the Samach Tzedek, that a person has to make over here Eretz Yisrael while he's in Chutz La'aretz. He should make his place in the world a place which is Eretz Yisrael connected to the Eibishter, which means in Aveda Ruchnis that a person should see to conquer his body and everything around him, that it should be connected to the Eibishter and coincide with the Eibishter's Ratzon. So also there are three types in Aveda, which is also we mention in davening. There's Ashreinu Matev Chalkeinu, then there's Lumanoim Geirolenu, Umayofi Yerushaseinu, which is the three ideas of Geirolenu and Chalkeinu and Yerushaseinu, which correspond to the three types of the three ways that there was the Chalukah Haaretz, which was also Al Yidei Geirolenu, and then there was also the Alpitam Vadas, which is Chalkeinu, our Chelik, our share in the Aveda, which means where we put in our own Seichel, our own efforts in the Aveda, and there was also the Yerushaseinu, which is Lamaila Mitam Vadas, which is something that we inherit, and we have El Samatana Milmaila, that part of because we inherited a neshama, and because of this neshama, we are able to do an Avedas Hashem. And this is also connected that we read by Mincha, Matis and Masei. We start reading the Parsha of Matis, which is also connected to Masei, because next week we read Matis and Masei. So the beginning of Matis speaks about Liyachal Dvari, the idea of Nidorim, that a person has to make sure that if he makes a neder, so then he has to keep the neder, and also the idea that a Chacham could take off a neder, which we also learn out from the first Parsha of Matis, which is the idea that every person constantly is speaking about Eretz Yisrael, and we speak about Eretz Yisrael so much, we speak about the Geula so much, that we actually can't even count the amount of times that we speak about the Geula, because it's too many to count. And we certainly are sure that the Eibishter will make sure that Leyachal Dvari, that our words will not go in vain, and therefore the words that we speak about, the Geula Hasidah, will something that will actually come about very speedily. And since the Eibishter has the Tachlis HaChochma, and the klal is that a Chacham is Eker Neder Mi'ikari, that he could take off the vow as if the vow was never there. So in other words, he makes that the Geula Hasidah should be not only something that besides the fact that we have Golus, we also have the Geula, but the Geula is such a Geula that we bring that the Golus itself is transformed into Geula, that everything becomes transformed into good. And this is also connected to Parshas Masei, that we find at the end of Parshas Masei. It speaks about the Masois, the traveling that they went from Eretz Mitzrayim. So obviously the last Masa will be when the Yidden will go out of Golus and come into Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach. And as it's brought down, as the end of the Parsha explains, that the last Masa was to Yardin Yerechei, on the side of the Yardin, on the Ma'ariv side of the Yardin, on the west side of the Yardin. And on the Yardin itself, the Yardin is very long. So it was corresponding to where Yerichei is, on the other side of the Yardin. Yerichei, as the Gemara says, was manel shel Eretz Yisrael. It was the key, it was the key and lock to Eretz Yisrael. In other words, when the Yidden conquered Yerichei, it's as if they conquered the entire Eretz Yisrael, which also teaches us and reminds us that the Geula Hasidah will come in such a way that when the Jews will actually be redeemed, it won't be that one Jew will be redeemed and the other Jew won't be redeemed. But it will be right away in Yarden Yereche that all the Jews, even the Jews that are in the lower hemisphere, and in the lower hemisphere, the Chatzi Kader Atachten, and the lowest part of the lowest hemisphere, will all be redeemed together, and they will be brought to Eretz Yisrael through the Geula Hasidah. And that's also brought out by the fact that we say, Eila Masei B'nei Yisrael, Masei Loshen Rabim. So the question is, why does it say the word Masei in the plural? It should say it in the singular. Because there was only one Masa which brought the Yidden out of Mitzrayim from Miramsei Sukesa. So Eila Masei B'nei Yisrael, which went out of Mitzrayim, there was really only one Masa. So why does it mention all the Masois? The Rebbe explained that one of the ways of explaining it is because really, originally, when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, that one Masa was supposed to be the Masa that was supposed to include all the other Masois. That all the other Masois, including the last Masa, which will be the Masa of the Geula Hasidah, was supposed to be included in the Masa that the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. And because of different things that the Yidden did, they had to stay in the Midbar for 40 years, until they actually came to the other Masois, until Yarden Yereche, and we will eventually have the last and final Masa, the Masa where Yidden will go out of Golus, but that's already all included in the Eila Masei B'nei Yisrael, which is the real Masa, the Masa where the Yidden was supposed to go out of Mitzrayim and immediately go into the Geula Hasidah, which is Min HaMeitzer, from Mitzrayim. We go Al HaMerchav, non-limited, which is the true Merchav, the Merchav which will be with Geula Hasidah. And as the Rebbe mentioned last Shabbos, he mentioned again today, that the Tzemach Tzedek brings down the Medrash that says, Zecher Asa L'Nifla'esav, that everything that happened until the Geula Hasidah is merely a Zecher for the Neflois, that will be Kimei Tzeis Chameretz Mitzrayim Arenu Neflois, the Neflois that will take place when Mashiach will come, and that will all be speedily in our days. The Rebbe also strongly emphasized what was already instituted for quite a number of years, the idea of learning the halachas of Beis HaBchira during the 3 weeks, starting from Yecheskel and Teireh Shebiksav, and also in Mishnayos, Midas, and Tomid, in Teireh Shebal Peh, and also in Rambam, which is also the halachas where it actually comes down la halacha, and in the Mishnayos itself, the Mishnayos Midas actually speaks about the Beis HaMikdash. Tomid already speaks about the karbonis which we are makriv in the Beis HaMikdash, and as the Medrash tells us, Medrash Tanchuma, that through the fact that the Jews learned the Torah of Beis HaMikdash, it's as if they were makriv the Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe also strongly emphasized the idea of making siyumim during the 9 days, and especially in the week Shechol Beit Tisha B'Av, the week of Tisha B'Av, and also on Tisha B'Av itself. And although obviously on Tisha B'Av you can't make a Suda, but as the famous the story of the Rebbe Nishma Seiden used to make, the Rebbe Rashab used to make siyumim, and not necessarily connected with a Su'udah. So we see the idea of a siyum, which is the idea of bringing in simcha into the 9 days, is something which is appropriate, even if a Su'udah is something which is an impossibility. So therefore, we should see to it, and it's something that you should try to influence others, that they should make siyumim during the 9 days, and through the siyumim, either in Teireh Shebal, in Gemara or Mishnayos, or in Rambam, a halacha of Rambam, or Sefer of Rambam. So through all this, we will bring that siyum b'mishpat tipada, v'shaveho b'tzdaka, and hopefully that by this Tisha B'Av, the Tisha B'Av will no longer be a day of fast, but rather the Yehafchu Yom Meila, that these days will be transformed to days of happiness. And not only that they won't be days of sadness, but on the contrary, they will be days of simcha, days of yontif, because of the maila that they were transformed from darkness into light. So it's the Yisrin Ha'er Habomen HaCheshev, the special light that comes as a result of darkness, is even a greater light. And that will happen in Mir Hashem, hopefully these 3 weeks, during these 3 weeks, that this Tisha B'Av will be a day of Yemei Simcha, Yemei Mishta, and a day of the Emes Simcha, B'Geula HaMitis V'Ashlema. A gute Woche.